everyone, I'm Bee. Welcome back to Read and Roam. I had a pretty eventful day yesterday. Listen to this. In the morning, I went on a hike. I didn't expect too much since it was just a walk through the woods, but it was actually amazing. There were birds chirping all around me, a warm breeze, and I could even smell scents of fresh pine and flowers. It was the most relaxing and pleasant thing I've done in a super long time. Then, later on at night, I had to go into the basement of my neighbor's house. They're on vacation, and they asked me to check on their cat, who sleeps down there. Well, it was cold, pretty dark, and I even heard a strange noise that came from some sort of machine. I kinda couldn't wait to get out of there. I was reminded that where you are really affects how you feel and how you act. When I was on the hike, I found myself not only happily walking around, but almost skipping and prancing. It was so much fun. When I was in the basement, it was creepy, unfamiliar, and just not very comfortable. That made me feel a little uneasy and scared. I found myself moving slowly and cautiously. It works like this with books, too. Where the story takes place has a lot to do with the events that happen. Let's explore this a bit. Okay, so knowing where a story happens is important, but it's also important to know when a story happens. This is called the setting, where and when a story takes place. So, a setting could be something like a busy city in the future, a quiet library at night, or an old western town from long ago. Every story has its own setting, and it might not have just one setting. It can change. Actually, most stories don't just happen in only one place and time. Now, let's get a look at some settings within stories. I'll read the beginning of 2 stories. Think about the settings as you listen and read along. Seagulls flew overhead as the wooden boat rocked gently on the waves. The smell of salt and fish filled the air. The sun was shining down onto the sail as it flapped in the breeze. Let's focus on the parts of this passage that tell us about the setting. Here are some words that tell us about the where. We have seagulls, waves, and the smell of salt and fish. Where would someone likely experience these things? Any ideas? It seems like we're on the ocean. Now, what can we figure out about when this story takes place? We don't know exactly when this is, but we do know that the sun was shining down, so it's definitely during the daytime. Here's another example describing a different setting. The metal doors slid open with a hiss, and Kara stepped cautiously into a dark hallway. Through a window, she noticed a streak of light cut through the stars. Was it another spaceship or just a shooting star? Kara saw the lights of a robot slowly moving toward her when she heard a scream from far away. So what about the setting for this one? Any ideas for the where in this story? Take a look at this passage in your notes and underline the words that give us clues about where this story takes place. Then, write what you think the setting is on the line provided. Pause the video and give it a try. Okay, so what words did you find? Let's see, we have metal doors, a dark hallway, spaceships, and robots. These clues can help us put together where we are. What was your idea for where this is possibly taking place? To me, it sounds like we're inside a spaceship of some kind. Now, what about the when? Think about whether this story seems to be taking place in the past, present, or future. What do you think? Well, because Kara is on a spaceship with robots on it, this certainly does not feel like the past or present. This story is probably taking place in the future. So there we are. The setting here is a spaceship in the future. This particular setting is dark and a bit mysterious and eerie. Sometimes an author will directly say what the setting is in a story, but most times we need to use clues to figure it out, like we just practiced. We can try to build the setting in our mind by paying attention to things like the sights, smells, and sounds in the story. Authors use their words to describe a setting so it comes to life for a reader. They do this by talking about how the setting looks and feels. Let's take a moment to try it for ourselves. Look at this setting. Can you use some words to describe this setting? Pause the video and write some describing words. How did you do? Maybe you described the green forest or the orange tent. Or you could have written words like peaceful or quiet, since there's nothing loud or busy in the image. Perhaps you wrote that the mountains and nature were beautiful. You also could have written that it's daytime, which tells the when. We can tell it's the day because the scene is well lit by the sun. Now, take a quick moment and think about your favorite story. Can you picture its setting? What do you think might happen if the setting of this story totally changed? Let's think about this idea together. We'll start with the first setting we read about, the one on the ocean. What kind of challenges or obstacles might a character face in this setting? Any ideas? Well, out in the ocean, there may be storms, big waves, or maybe a hole in the boat. Problems like this make stories interesting, but a storm or a hole in a boat are problems that would only make sense for a setting like this. What if the setting changed? Could you imagine a storm or a hole in a boat being a problem if we were in the other setting we read about, the spaceship? That wouldn't really make sense. A different setting would call for different problems or obstacles. Let's do some practice related to this idea. Take a look at these story events: getting chased by a robot, losing a paddle, getting locked in a room, and seeing a big sea creature. Let's think about the setting for each event. Pause here and record whether each event would take place in an ocean or a spaceship setting. Did you write a setting for each one? Getting chased by a robot and getting locked in a room would both likely happen in the spaceship setting. The other two events, losing a paddle and seeing a big sea creature, would happen in the ocean setting. So, as you can see, these two different settings would each allow for very different events in a story. Where and when the story takes place has a lot to do with what happens and what challenges the characters face. Characters and their actions also depend on the setting. In the ocean, a character could do specific things related to this setting. For example, they could paddle a boat or go fishing, right? What about if the setting were in the spaceship? Paddling or fishing probably wouldn't be possible. But a spaceship is a setting that would allow characters to do other actions, like perhaps meeting an alien or floating in zero gravity. So while the setting does a lot on its own, it also works together with the other parts of the story, like the characters and events, so that everything makes sense. This is why an author chooses the settings for their stories very carefully. It has a big impact on what happens. And when a setting changes, there's a good chance the story and characters change along with it. All right, so today we learned that the setting is where and when a story takes place. A story's setting influences what happens in a story, what challenges the characters face, and what actions the characters take. So setting by itself doesn't make a story interesting. the setting works together with characters and events to bring a story to life, and we'll look into this in some upcoming videos. Until then, where there are words, there's a world to explore. See you next time.
Hey, hey.